Welcome to another episode of The Corner Booth, the official podcast of restaurantowner.com. Today, the restaurant industry is changing faster than ever. Learn from successful independent restaurant operators and other industry leaders as they share best practices that will help you engage your team, delight your guests, and grow your business.
And welcome everyone to another episode of Corner Booth. I'm Chris Tripoli with restaurantowner.com. And today I'm bringing you sort of an interesting perspective. Many of our guests are independent food service operators, as you know, willing to share their story and help us learn from one another. Today's a little break from that because my guest is coming to us from Great Britain. We are talking to a very uniquely positioned individual because she is surrounded by perspective that she collects from industry analysts, independent consultants who are dedicated to the improved performance and growth of the food service industry. I'm talking about Tina Nielsen, the editor of FCSI Foodservice Consultant magazine. Some of you might realize what FCSI is. It is the only international organization of independent food service consultants. And so Tina is going to be spending time with us to talk about issues that we are all facing and things that she has learned along the way and trends that we can all learn from. So Tina Nielsen, thank you so much for taking some time. Welcome to Corner Booth.
Thank you, Chris, and thank you for the invite. I'm excited to join you.
This is going to be great because I've always enjoyed your perspective on things. You have been the editor of what I think is one of the leading food service magazines that talks to issues that are related to trends, customer preferences, and how operators are meeting them, and some of the increasing issues that operators are facing. And so I look forward to you sharing with our listeners some of those things. But before we do, it might be good if you could share a little bit about yourself, how you got to where you are, how you developed your interest in hospitality.
Sure. So, well, I'm a journalist. I'm a freelance journalist and editorial consultant. One of the many hats that I wear is, and the main hat really is as the editor of FCSI's Foodservice Consultant magazine. I started out as a business writer and sort of moved sideways about 10 years into my career. I moved sideways to food service. And it happened by chance, but also food service and hospitality is something I was interested in. I mean, we all like going out to dinner, but
So we saved you. We saved you from that drab business writing to get you into something that's not only interesting, but much more important, food and beverage.
That's right. And I found myself just kind of gravitating towards any sort of business stories that happen to be about the restaurant sector or a chef interview or a new restaurant. And before I knew it, I was writing the restaurant reviews for this business magazine. And so when the chance came up to start working on the food service content for Foodservice Consultant, I jumped at the chance. But I think actually the business background puts me in a really sweet spot because I write about the business of food and the business of food service and the stories behind the plate and what goes on before the diner sits down to eat the food and all the kind of the surrounding elements. So I think that's something I really enjoy. I've been the editor of the magazine since 2017. I've been involved in that project since 2015. I'm contracted by a publishing agency called 1473 Media. And they have, I mean, we've worked on FCSI's content since 2012. And we're suppliers, but we very much consider ourselves part of the FCSI family. We're very embedded. I've just come back from Host Milano. And it's always just wonderful to see the people that we work with and catch up with them. It's a very, very human sector, which is partly why I really love it.
Yes.
And yeah, I'm Danish, actually. You said Great Britain, but I've moved in Ireland now for 2 years. But I was in Great Britain. It's near enough. I was in Great Britain. I was in London for 25 years. Born and raised in Denmark. Lived in Spain for 4 years in my sort of late teens, early 20s. then moved to London, and I came to the UK. I came to Dublin 2 years ago. So I always say that I'm more European than any particular nationality. Of course, I'm Danish, but
Sure.
my outlook is European. My outlook is global, and the magazine is genuinely global, which is something
Yes.
I really love because you can really start drawing the parallels. So you can see that what happens to this independent restaurant owners in Los Angeles is also happening to the independent restaurant owners in Mumbai. So
Sure, sure.
they
Well,
should.
you hit on two really interesting points there in your background, and I really do agree that having that initial business background must help your perspective as you're looking at the information that you gather, the articles that you write regarding food service, because it is, in addition to the fun part, the culinary, the design, and the entertaining, most of us are always concerned with how to improve us as a business. So that's really important. And the second thing that you touched on too is the globalization of these trends and how different parts of the world might really be sharing the same successes, the same concerns, and the same challenges, as everyone else. So could you touch a little bit more on the basis for FCSI, the makeup of that organization, from the standpoint of where you get most of the information that you can produce for other operators in this magazine?
Mm. Yeah, so FCSI is made up of there's kind of two population groups of FCSI. You have the commercial kitchen designers, the planners, and then the management consultants that we call MAS, Management Advisory Services. And I mean, they do have certain crossovers, but they basically, I mean, I would say that in the magazine, in a general sort of average issue, I'll probably speak to I'd say we speak to 25 consultants from across the world because they really are the experts and there's no agenda. They tell us how they see it. They work at the coal phase every day. And then, of course, there's all the organizations that collect all the data that impacts on the work of the consultant. So this is a nice kind of ecosystem that we can draw on. There's a real kind of hive mind of FCSI that you can draw on because I know, for example, I'm writing something about, say, energy reduction, sustainability in food service. Well, I know exactly which consultant I need to contact for that because I
Mm.
I know who the experts are in each area.
That's excellent. Well, you know what? So let's just roll up our sleeves and jump into some of those areas. I'm anxious to hear, based on the information that you gather and the sources that you work with, how you see the world from the consumer's point of view now. How have the customer profile and their habits shifted? Have we redefined any buying habits that maybe impact different sectors of, the independent restaurant business person?
Well, I think we were just actually at Host Milano. I chaired a panel session about the changing customer experience, and I think what's really difficult for especially the smaller operators today is that they're catering to such a broad demographic because you're faced with increasingly discerning younger customers, Gen A and Gen Z, the millennials, but you also have baby boomers who still really want to go out and have a great time, but they have different needs. So it's about how you cater to all groups. And I think what it really comes down to is that actually, of course, it matters the food that's on the plate. But I think the conclusion from our panel session was that a successful customer experience is that they want to come back and they want to tell their friends to go there. They want to put a post on Instagram. Having said that, I do think that customers are much more demanding today. Young people have kind of redefined uh, value. Value doesn't is not cheap. It's something that's worth their time. And I think they want an experience. They don't just want to go and eat and go. They want to maybe have an immersive experience or something cool, something different, something they can put on Instagram. And they're very much driven by social media in
Yeah.
their quest for the next place. I do think that it's there's we feature projects from Foodservice Consultants in each edition. And I think it was earlier this year, or last year, one of our consultants shared a project with us where they'd opened a craft brewery in a senior living facility. And
Okay.
I think there you have it in a nutshell, because a senior living facility now don't just want it to be comfortable for their residents, they wanna have craft beer too. And I think that's a really kind of symptomatic point of the times we live in.
Well, I tell you what, I'm hoping that that trend will continue and broaden so that, oh, as we get older, we have so much more to look forward to than the type of food service that is typically associated with senior living. So you said a couple of very interesting things there, and I think the independent restaurant operator needs to adjust to that. We all struggle with increasing costs, occupancy cost, opening cost, construction, and then once we get open, cost of goods, concern about product costs, labor costs. So we're always concerned with cost and how we can manage those costs in a way where we can still keep price, reasonable. And so I really want to focus on that comment that it's maybe the consumer's helping us a little bit in that they're getting value more from, is this worth my time? Did you provide me an experience that I crave and I will come back? Rather than the way we used to define value, which is, how cheap can you make this? That's a point well underlining that value is being defined now, not just by price, but by what the heck are you delivering for the price that you're charging?
Yeah, but also younger customers today, they they don't just want it, so they want value for what's worth their time. They want something that they can really enjoy, that is a good experience. But they also want to know that the meat is responsibly sourced. They also interested in the fact that a restaurant treats their staff nicely. There's so many more elements now because younger customers in particular are really switched on to those things.
That's true. And now we have been living with that. That's an issue that I think was sort of a pre-COVID issue. We did see the importance of what people were calling farm to table, knowing the sources, healthier treatment of animals. We've been having a really good movement towards handling of product, recyclability, using product and materials that are a little bit safer and easier on the planet. So that's pretty good. But one of the major trends, though, that I think has that COVID's created and it's continued to grow after that is the fact that we want that quality but we are demanding the convenience. Are you finding the drive for convenience, deliver to my door, third-party delivery? Everyone has to have some type of a really good online ordering, car-side pickup, and delivery program, I would imagine.
Totally. I mean, there's a staggering figure out recently, a couple of months ago maybe, that 75% of restaurant transactions in the US are for off-premise consumption. I mean, I just find that absolutely staggering.
That
70.
is incredible. I have not heard it that high. 75% of transactions are for off-premise dining.
The drive-through delivery and pickup.
Well,
Uh,
yeah. Yeah, when you look at it that way, certainly in some market segments, the lower price and what we call QSR and counter service, absolutely. People are wanting it, and they're wanting it now. Drive-throughs are incredibly busy. You know, you've gotta have multiple lanes, in order to keep up really in today's market, and third-party delivery is a monster. So 75% of restaurant transactions could be for off-premise consumption. And we talked about the importance of sustainability. You've talked about the importance of the customer profile a little bit and the difference in value. Have we noticed sort of a return after, COVID years ago to the need for socialization? Are we finding that there's always going to need to be, inside dining?
that I think that's such an interesting area because there is clearly a trend for the. I mean, people are getting their food for takeaway or for off-premise consumption. But so people are not necessarily seeking out sitting in a busy dining room. And there's a well-recognized epidemic of loneliness in the world. And I wrote an article along with one of our member consultants, Karen Melody, on how hospitality can be the cure for the loneliness epidemic. And I do think that there's definitely a craving. People do want to get together, but I don't know whether it's because we're too busy or just driven by convenience. But I think there's definitely a trend away from right now. The way it's looking is definitely a trend away from sitting together with other people. That you go and you get your food, you get out. But I think it's turning. I absolutely think it's turning. I mean, one nice bit of news from my point of view is that Starbucks, for example, recently, the CEO there came in and said, I want to close X number of pickup only stores, but I also want you to put the chairs back in all the stores where you took the chairs out, because Starbucks was initially it was the third space. It was for people to go and hang out and be together and share moments, not just to go in, looking at your phone, grabbing a coffee and going back out. So I think there's definitely something that's turning. And I spoke to you before about a project that I've launched here in Dublin, which is called the Gathering Table. And that was launched really to bring people together around a table, around some wonderful food and celebrating small producers. That was the thing we really wanted to get to the fore. We sold out. We had 2 long tables of people. Sure, there were some people who knew each other, but a lot of people came as strangers and left as friends. And so I think there's definitely a craving that people do want to speak to strangers. People do want to just break bread with people that they've not met before. So I do think there is a turn, but we've got to watch it. I do think we've got to watch it because it's not it's well proven it's not good for our health.
Well, that's very true. This is going to be, I think, a very interesting thing to watch in the short term. We have to balance what I agree with you on, and I've heard from many other analysts, and I've seen in other articles, is that need for socialization and how food and beverage does that. And the independent operator has such an advantage in creating that sense of community, being active in the community, inviting people from the neighborhood, creating different tastings, dinner clubs. Everyone wants to rally around their favorite little diner or favorite husband and wife Italian restaurant. They identify with the people and there's that need to come together. So people who are developing restaurants are going to be challenged with meeting that need, with yet at the same time, the unbelievable increase that we're challenged by with facing opening costs. And I'm speaking more directly to the costs of building these larger spaces, construction costs, occupancy, ongoing rent. So people are sort of balancing with the fact that we want to have the socialization, come together, an interesting environment, a place to be, but I got to make it smaller because, affordability. I think we're going to be seeing some very interesting, well-designed, smaller footprint restaurants in our future. Do you agree?
Do. And unfortunately, that probably also means for the chefs that they'll have increasingly smaller kitchens because restaurant managers need to optimize the space they have.
Absolutely.
I think there's designers and architects out there who have some really smart ideas on how to make the restaurants fit in as many people as possible without it being uncomfortable. I mean, I've having the bar for single diners, for example, because you have to recognize that there will always be people who are out of necessity dining solo or because they want to. So
Mhm.
the bar and then have some nice shared tables, but you could also have one longer table. But it definitely has an impact on the kitchen ultimately.
Well, and you mentioned that international brand that did lead the way, 3 decades or more ago by developing that sense of place when you were talking about Starbucks and their coffee. And initially, that's what we saw was how to create a place, sit, relax, A good place for after school, kids get their beverages and do homework. It was a great little community. You saw ladies discussing things in the afternoon before they might be running to pick up kids to take to swim practice or something, or to pick up after school. You saw men and women who were maybe small individual business people that would camp out because it was comfortable. They could make their sales calls, work on their laptop. Their office was really the neighborhood Starbucks. And so I'm hoping that they might be reading the tea leaves correctly and that we might be coming back to that, because you're right, he wants to go back to the comfort, some chairs, the idea of a place to be. And again, if that trend is continuing, that's something that we will see restaurants wanting to revert to. Keep the convenience, keep the delivery, but you've got to create some hospitality zone within your restaurant.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, hospitality is about that, isn't it? It's about bringing people together. Is feeding people. Is making them feel at home, make them feel like belonging. And so it is possible to do because there are plenty of places that do that. They do it well, but it is an art, and I think it has to be genuine. You can't do that as a pure business transaction. People who risk it all to open a small restaurant, it's because they're passionate about it and there's a fire burning in them. Because if not, I mean, you don't do it to get rich, do you?
Well, yeah, I know, unlike what many people might think that are in other industries, this is not really food service is not really a get rich quick, jump in, make a bunch of money because you ran a very popular restaurant type of a thing.
No, and much less now. The headwinds that small restaurants are facing are just overwhelming, I think. Inflation, shortage of staffing, sustainability issues that they have to comply with regulation, rightly so. But, prices are going up, customers want it cheaper. It's really difficult. And I think to have a small restaurant running successfully and with people coming in every day is a triumph. It's, anybody who achieves that has achieved something really special.
Let's talk about some of those challenges a little bit more in detail. I know we already touched on the fact that for the people who are doing design and development, they're walking into tremendously higher opening costs, construction, occupancy costs, rental rates, are crazy. But for those who are already operating, you mentioned that the idea of product costs. And the big one, what are you finding with the people that you are working with and the trends that you're putting into articles on how people are reacting to labor shortage? Is it increased use of technology? Are there interesting trends that people are developing in order to increase their retention? How are people reacting to, guess what is just known worldwide as a restaurant labor crisis?
Yeah, it really is. It is a genuinely global problem, and it seems to be evergreen as well. I think in the last 10 years, almost every time you speak to somebody, it's been staffing has been a problem, and the pandemic just made it a lot worse. So it is a genuinely global problem. I think people are still trying out a load of different solutions. I think the fact that there are younger restaurateurs coming into the business now is changing the game a bit because they've been through a difficult time. It's very difficult to attract staff because food service is not particularly a sector or a job, a profession that's known for work-life balance. Is not really well paid. Is it can be quite short on the rewards, but it can also be really amazing if it's done right. I spoke to a restaurant in Copenhagen. Obviously, I have to underline the fact that Denmark is not a poor country, so they might have some different resources to deal with. But a restaurant manager there who has made a very deliberate attempt to develop his staff to make sure that they are happy.
Yeah.
He has invested in training that is nothing to do with hospitality because he has said to them, if one day you fall out of love with hospitality, we need to make sure that you are prepared for whatever is next. And I mean, I realize that this is maybe quite extreme because a lot of people would probably just be happy with having good work hours, a decent pay, and being treated nicely. But I think recognizing that your staff are humans and they count as much as the people at the top as well. They can feel a part of it. They're not just a piece in the puzzle.
Right.
Uh, they have to be part of the bigger picture. I think that's really important. But I also think ultimately, if you want to pay your staff a decent wage, you're you have to also explain to the customers that perhaps the price that they've paid for the food up to this point has not actually reflected the true cost of the plate of food. And I think a lot of people really diners want cheap food. But obviously, I mean, we all want a good deal. But do they want a good deal at the expense of staff not being paid well or staff not being happy? So I think we almost need to recalibrate the expectations around the hospitality experience. And people need to understand that they want the best carrots. Well, the best carrots will cost a little bit more. They want the staff to be really nice, to provide really excellent service. Well, then the staff needs to feel appreciated. And that all comes down to money, I'm afraid. And so it does mean that the food that you serve might be a little bit more expensive. Well, I think we've got used to a low cost meal so we can eat out 3, 4 times a week. Well, maybe that's not the right way to do it. That's just my point of view.
Well, I think what I've been finding and what other guests here at Corner Booth have been underlining meets a couple of your points, I think, head on. There does seem to be a trend. And this goes back to one of the first things that you mentioned, that the customers themselves have redefined a sense of value. Thank heavens, because I know years ago we would have thought value just meant cheap. You had to have a value meal. They were looking for cheap. The drive-thrus taught us that. You ordered by number. Value meal number 2, number 3, number 4, because we were driven by what is cheap. It is helpful now to know that at least the customer is defining value more on the worth of their time and the experience it's given. So that means that they are paying a little bit more. Throughout the United States, we've noticed that people are. QSR is a higher price, and that's the least expensive market segment. But if you're going through a drive-through today, trust me, you're spending a few dollars a person more than you were just a few short years ago. Neighborhood independently owned restaurants, are always mindful of prices that they can charge. But most every trend that we're finding, depending on style of food, or if it's full service, it's a few dollars more than it was just a few short years ago. We seem to have that guest acceptance. The other trend that I'm seeing that I think hits some of your points head on is that there are more operators now who are grasping the situation much like the example you gave. They're grasping the situation that employees aren't just short-sighted to be employed to do a function and that's all. Employees need to feel more like team members, that they belong, so that their input is sought after. They're a they're engaged in what's going on. They seem to stay longer if they feel like they're a part of something. So I'm not just working here just to do work and get a check. I work here because I feel like I belong here. I'm appreciated. I'm important. I'm being taught things. So those are the things that I think for our listeners today to make a note of. If the staff are reacting well to being involved, being appreciated, cross-training, being taught things, so they're more valued, then you have a chance of them staying longer.
Yeah, they need to feel that they're invested in, that they're not just a commodity. But of course, there are functions in a restaurant that, frankly, few people want to do. And if you can automate it, all the better. I mean, it's very difficult to recruit KPs now. So seeing warewashing manufacturers coming out with fully automated systems is a godsend because that's a lousy job. So I do think automation is a big solution for this crisis of staffing because it is something that a lot of restaurants are really suffering from. And so, of course, one of the solutions is automation, is to introduce equipment that is easier to use for perhaps the staff that don't have the skills to start using their intuition with cooking.
I'd like to spend a little bit of time on that because I think you're in a great position. You collect information from people and working more directly with designers and providers than many of us might have an opportunity to do, to share with us what you are seeing in addition to, say, warewashing. What are you seeing as far as the uses of technology that aren't just on the customer side, because we a lot of restaurants are already getting very well adjusted to technology, some use of AI, and programs that might that are directed to the customer. But behind the scenes, to actually simplify operations and lessen costs, what's out
Yeah.
there you see coming down the pipe?
So the just the straight up automated equipment and simplified equipment as well. So you may have, and this is just to really to tackle that shortage of skilled staff. So ovens with little drawings instead of having to set the temperature on the timer or whatever. You have a
Mhm.
picture of a chicken, you hit the button with the chicken, and that's it. But AI is really making massive advances in within the cooking department as well. So, you have the smart ovens, you have computer vision in the oven, so you can recognize what's being cooked. It's automatically just adjusting everything. So it is making it a lot easier to operate in the kitchen, but also where maybe before you needed, I don't know, 8 members of staff, maybe now you need 5 or 6.
Right.
You save money. You can keep your restaurant open.
So do you see a sort of a double-edged sword here where we might be working with automation, high use of technology, use of fewer people, simplify operations? Those are all notes that I'm taking off of what you told me. I see those trends too. And it's going to be very interesting to see how that gets into the smaller neighborhood and independently owned restaurant business. But then the other side of the sword is, how do we balance that with that guest's need for socialization? It's almost like we want the convenience that they're ending. We need to lower costs in order to do that. But we've got to deliver the service that they deserve. So is that going to be kind of an interesting line to draw? Where do you see it?
Well, I mean, back of house doesn't really have too much of an impact on
Mhm.
the customer. It does have an impact, and this is something I tend to ask, almost playing the devil's advocate when I speak to people who say how amazing it is with all the automation. That there also a point where you think, well, to what extent do we automate everything and make it really simple rather than elevate the level of the staff skills? So do we invest in training so we can actually have people who know how to do this rather than just press a button? So that's one thing. But I think in the front of house, I think people absolutely want the human touch. I appreciate that something like paying the bill. Some people might not want to sit and wait for the waiter to come with a bill. It might be handy to have a QR code they can just scan and tap and pay. The QR code menus are pretty much everywhere. It's something I really dislike. I mean, I really don't like the QR code menus because I spend so much of my day in front of a screen. I don't want to see the menu on the screen. But I appreciate that that's super convenient for some people. Um,
Mhm.
it's very much I think it's about being accommodating as well, because if I come into a restaurant and they give me a QR code, I very honestly say, could I please have a paper menu to read, because that's what I prefer. And I think from an operating point of view, it's just silly to insist on the QR code if they do have an alternative. It's about making the experience a pleasant one for each individual customer. And some people might just want the speed and the ease, and they might not want to speak to a waiter. But I really enjoy speaking to waiting staff. I like asking them about the specials or just having a chat, I guess, and having that human interaction. But I think it's very much there's no it's not one size fits all, is that?
What great point. I mean, I couldn't agree more. We're a tremendously large industry. But when you break it down, there isn't really just a one size fits all. We can't do things the same way. And I think what you just hit on is the challenge for everyone who is listening, and that is find a way of balancing convenience with the personal service. It's almost like we know that we're expecting and demanding convenience. But at the same time, we also know that in order to build your business, find your point of difference, you got to somehow connect. And so maybe if we are flexible, we don't all have to have a kiosk at the counter, although some people really enjoy that. Bingo, bingo, hit the buttons, I'm done. But if we could also have a person behind the counter who's still willing to talk, suggestive sell, eye-to-eye contact, show appreciation, thank you, the little bit of service, and that's just in the QSR situation. I love the example that you gave that, yes, even in full-service dining, some people might like the QR code. I can read it myself. I'm ready to go. Or I like the quickness of just pay at the table. Everyone is kind of doing that. But you still have to have staff that are willing and educated to be able to engage, explain, make suggestions, show appreciation. Not everyone wants to order off a QR code. I, like you, do want to see the menu.
Yeah. I I understand that it's very convenient for the operator as well because the menu changes and it's easy to go in and change. So I understand there's a cost aspect as well, printing new menus and what have you. Just on that point of tailoring the service, sort of based on, because it is a situation where you have to read the customer, don't you? And we were in Dubai in November last year hosting the Gulf Host conference. It's a food service excellence summit, I think it was called, and I hosted a panel with a group of chefs, and we were talking exactly about this, about how do you read the customer? How important is it to read the customer? One of the chefs, I guess he sort of recognized that sometimes the staff just can't read the customer and what they want. So they had they'd introduce these smart little cards that they left on the table, and I don't know if it was red, it was like, I don't want much interaction. I just want the basics we have for an intimate, private experience. Yellow is like, I'll have a medium level of attention. And green was like, tell me everything. And it just made it easier for the server to know, because sometimes they can get it wrong. Sometimes, you don't always read the customer right. And so it's a helpful tool to make the experience better for both parts, so there's no awkwardness, I guess.
Well, I hadn't heard of that example yet. That's a new one, and I think that's great. A little stoplight kind of thing. Red, yellow, green. Come on with it. Give me the whole show. Or use caution. I only need you a little bit. Or red, stop before you even get started.
I'm on a date, leave me alone.
Well, I do like, however, what is coming out as far as a service trend, and that is forgetting about, and it comes from chefs because the small independent chef driven concept sometimes has this battle between right and wrong, and the customer is always right. Well, the chef is going to say, I don't know where that got started. That's an ugly rumor, because a lot of times the customer isn't right. But what I'm sensing is that those in the know have come to the position of saying that's not even the question. Who cares? The customer's always the customer. Find a way to be flexible enough to service them, make them happy. It's not about right or wrong. It's about what works. How are you seeing that?
I would totally agree. I really think that it's not really about right or wrong, because we're all different. But if you're a small restaurant owner, your objective of the night is to make sure that each individual customer leaves with an experience that wants them to come back again. And we all have different desires and different requests, and if you can accommodate, surely you don't want to accommodate anybody being unreasonable. If I walk into a restaurant and I get given a table in a location that I'm not overly fond of, maybe just by the waiting station, and if the rest of the restaurant is empty and I say, could I please have that table? Be flexible. Yeah. Don't say, oh no, if I'm looking at the system, that's been allocated to other people who are not here yet. So I think it's all about being flexible, but also be be assertive when it's unreasonable customers, because then you're there to serve, but you're not there to be on your knees. And I think, the customer has to respect the small operators. And I actually think very few people have a true appreciation of just how difficult it is to run a small independent restaurant. And sometimes they need to be told, I guess.
I like that. I like that. No, that is true. We are doing our darndest to try to help, the small independent operator succeed. And it is getting harder. And I think it's incumbent upon us to find that balance of increasing efficiency to lower cost, but to help increase that experience so that you're bonding with the customers. We talk a lot about the retention of staff. We've got to retain the guests because they've got choices. We seem to make this industry more and more competitive because, as difficult as it is, restaurants continue to open and we continue to raise the level of guest expectation because they have more choices. Are you finding that in other places of the world as well?
Am I finding what? Sorry, that people have.
The increasing in competition and the more and more restaurants, so that basically the customers just have more choices.
Yeah. I mean, but there are also a lot of closures. It's I mean, there are a lot of openers. There are a lot of brave souls out there opening new restaurants, even though they can see that many places are closing. But absolutely, there's so much choice, and so you really have to be on your toes and make sure that people leave happy. But it's also about having some thought before you open and doing proper due diligence with the market. Because if there's no real demand for what you want to offer, then it's a non-starter. So I think restaurant operators just really have to be super switched on now, really speak to their customers as well, but also speak to the staff. You often have young people working in both front of house and back of house.
Mhm.
They're tuned into a different generation. Find out what they like.
Well, as we continue through 2026, what are the issues that you see high on your list for industry research articles to be written and presented to those of us in the industry?
I mean, sustainability is never going to go away. I don't think, and it's just getting more and more important. And sustainability in all its guises, because
Yeah.
see, it's not just about food waste anymore. I mean, I think maybe 10, 15 years ago, when we thought about sustainability, we thought about food waste, but now it's embodied carbon, it's energy reduction, it's water usage. And I think really sustainability almost plays a part in almost every article we have in the magazine, because it's also human sustainability, it's financial sustainability. So I think that's a really big one. Sustainability will be ever present in the magazine. New technologies, automation, robotics, despite everything I say about we need human touch and human capital, it's efficiencies, isn't it? You control the cost, you control what goes in and out of your budget, and efficiency is optimization of services. AI is going to be massive in that sense because you can cut a lot of costs. But just on the sustainability issue with food waste, it's it's still such a huge issue that, and it differs so much. I mean, I had this amazing bit of information at the weekend when I spoke to consultants from different parts of the world in Milan, and in the EU, I think the average consumer has 15 kilos of food waste every year. In Brazil, the average consumer has 94 kilos of food waste a year. So there's such huge challenges.
Absolutely. And they seem to continue. Our time is running short. Tina, I can't thank you enough for sharing the issues that you're working on, the opinions of the state of our industry, tips for independent operators on the balance and the meeting of those near challenges with customer satisfaction and efficiency in operations. We've been listening to Tina Nielsen, the editor of FCSI Consultant Magazine. You can find what's the best way to connect with you, Tina, for those who might want to find more information on these issues?
Well, our website is fcsi.org, and that's where you can also find the Digimax. You can subscribe to the magazine there as well. We have a weekly newsletter that goes out, and by all means, look us up on Instagram, LinkedIn. We're all the right places.
There we go, FCSI.org. Thank you again, Tina, and thank you to everyone. I hope we can meet up again real soon on another Corner Booth. Go make it a great shift.
Thank you for joining us on the Corner Booth. We'll be back next Tuesday with more inspiration, insights, and industry best practices to help you engage your team, delight your guests, and grow your business.